Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world, bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on TikTok. A very good evening to you. Folks, we are teleprompter free, and we are the show which is about being British and about staying together and about loving our fantastic United Kingdom, because we are in a battle for the hearts and the minds and the souls of everybody in Britain. And please, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, because that's the main way that YouTube announces to everybody else that we are in fact broadcasting, and that it might be something that other people will be interested in as well. That really helps the YouTube algorithm. And if you're watching on Facebook, please like and share. And if you're watching on Twitter, please give us a retweet, because we are depending upon you, the viewer, to help us to get this pro-UK message out there. Now, folks, we've got a great show lined up for you as always. At the bottom of the hour, we've got a guest. We've got Liz Phillips coming back in, and she's going to be telling us about something unfortunate that happened. That's Liz there. She's been on the show before, and she's the organiser of the Great Resist Conference. Now, she was going to be having another one of her conferences in Liverpool on Saturday, just gone, Saturday the 11th, but one person complained, and unfortunately the hotel cancelled the booking, and at least 300 people were sorely disappointed by that. So we're going to be finding out what that was all about and seeing if there's anything that can be done about it, because that sort of thing simply should not be allowed to happen in a country where they claim we have got freedom of speech and assembly, although there's quite a lot of people complaining about freedom of speech and assembly from all sides of the political spectrum these days, isn't there? Except, of Force for Good, we're standing true for the principle. Now, before our guest, we'll have On This Day in British History, and it will be for this little badge. Now, Remembrance Day has passed, but we're still in the month of remembrance, and so it's still relevant to have that there. A poppy that says, "Lest we forget." And engraved in there is, "All gave some, and some gave all." From the song, "All came through for the red, white and blue, but some had to fall." Now, before that as well, we're going to be talking about the Rwanda situation, okay? Now, we're going to be explaining what happened today in the Supreme Court, why it happened, and what needs to change in order for our immigration and asylum policies to work. And that's going to be quite an extended bletheration that I'm going to make in a few minutes, because I've got it all, as usual, figured out. And I'll be explaining it to you all. Before we do that, let's say hello to a few of our great AFFG family. And first in from the AFFG family tonight was Derek Hart, who says, "Good evening, it's great to see you back." Yes, we've been away for 2 weeks because we've been writing our book, our weapon of mass instruction, called One Big Country, Volume 1 of a big book for the Union, which is going to be out in time for Christmas. We'll keep you posted on that. Derek says, "More and more SNP officials think they can get away with changes to the UK taxpayers." And Michael Matheson seems to thinks so he can get away with not showing the data usage on his tablet. Although he might be finally paying the bill, we'll just have to see. But it certainly does suggest the extent to which the SNP rip you off. No, sir, this is not a wig. This is my real hair. Answering a person there on TikTok. Please do share our live, folks, on TikTok. Ian says the Supreme Court are law lords who have moved across the road, just as Holyrood is basically a parliamentary committee based in Scotland. Yes, the law lords, as they used to be called, are now called the Supreme Court judges, in a nod to the Americanism of our Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Tony Blair, for that. Hello to Harry Todd, who says Alvin Stardust is back on TikTok. Hello to British Legends and Harry Brown, who says good evening, hope your day has been well. Strange to hear David Cameron is getting back into politics. That was absolutely absurd. I could not believe that. I woke up and it's like, David Cameron, I'm sure he's not even an MP. And I immediately Googled it, and yeah, he left at the 2017 general election. He stood down and just became a normal member of Civvy Street. Well, not a normal member, a very well recompensed member of Civvy Street, getting a lot of money for probably doing very little, sitting on corporate boards. But beyond that, he's not an MP at all. But they brought him back in. Now, I'm not against bringing people in and making them lords and then maybe appointing them to a government position. I think in a way that can work. But to make them actually foreign secretary and for it to be David Cameron, that just blew my mind. I could not believe that. But you know what? You better watch out. See if Keir Starmer gets in. I would not be surprised if he brings back Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. And he'll just say, well, the precedent has been set by the Conservatives. I mean, I know that Gordon Brown has a lot of crazy ideas for devolution and federalism, which he'll want to lead on. He'll definitely want to lead on that. So they could well make him a cabinet member again. I'm sure he's pushing for it anyway. So let's fingers crossed that they don't. Or maybe it would be a good thing, so we could at least see it from the horse's mouth, as it were. Hello to Paul from the saturated garden of England. Raining down there, is it, Paul? Hello to Kat. Hey to you also. And to Stuart from Elgin. Yeah, and to Derek. And to that Preston journalist. Great to see you, Ash. Shambles of a government we have. Rishi was always going to fail on Rwanda. Well, I really want to speak about that and tell you all about it. It's absolutely crazy, really. But yeah, he was destined to fail, and you wonder if it was deliberate in many ways, because they left a glaring loophole, which I'll get to in a moment. Christopher says, good evening from Falkirk. Good evening, Christopher. Nice to see you. Harry wore his Lest We Forget badge that he won last year. He wore it at work. Good for you. Good for you, Harry. Hello to Catherine and to Ryan from a wet and windy West Riding. And to Alfie. All fellow Unionists. Ross says, if you don't like laws, you can change them now. Well, that's what we have a parliament for. It is for changing laws and making them better. And that's what we elect people to do. And if folk don't like the laws that get changed, well, so be it. They can vote for somebody else. Hello, Anthony. Good evening to you. OG on TikTok says, vote Reform UK. I know that a lot of people have been saying that. Also, Budgie Burger says something that we won't actually bring up because it is a little bit unfortunate. Now, let's talk about what happened today at the Supreme Court. Okay, now folks, we've got our guest coming up at 7:30. fresh from being cancelled in Liverpool, and she's going to tell us all about that. If you're watching on TikTok, you won't see the interview. You'd need to check over our site on YouTube. However, let's look at the Rwanda plan. Now, this was the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, and it was a bit of a kind of wacky plan in many ways, but today the Supreme Court ruled it unlawful. Now let's examine why they ruled it unlawful. And before we do that, we have to speak about something called the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, this was an international treaty which Britain signed up to in 1951, and it came into effect in 1953, and it involves well over 40 countries throughout Europe who are all signed up to this document, and this document is law. Now, the ECHR, as we're going to call it, is to be distinguished from, is to be differentiated from the European Union. It's not a part of the European Union as such. So when we left the European Union, we were still subject to the European Convention of Human Rights, and we still are subject to it. It is our ultimate human rights law. Now, prior to 1998, you could claim your human rights under the ECHR, but you'd need to go to the ECHR court, which was in Strasbourg. So in 1998, the British government at the time integrated the entire ECHR document into British law, and they called it the Human Rights Act 1998. So what that meant was that your European human rights were now directly justiciable, and you could appeal them directly here in the UK. So we've basically got two laws which are very similar, which are almost the same. The ECHR, which is in Strasbourg, which is the ultimate one, and the Human Rights Act 1998, which is the British one, which mirrors the ECHR. That's the situation at the moment. It means that people can claim their human rights directly here in the UK through an appeal to the Human Rights Act 1998. Now, but let's concentrate on the ECHR, the main one. And there are two articles in that which people who are immigrating or people who are going to be deported can appeal to in order to stay in the UK. One of them is Article 3 and the other is Article 8. And those are really the only two articles in the ECHR which affect immigration and asylum and deportation and extradition and so on. And Article 3 says, no one shall be subjected to torture or to inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. And Article 8 says, everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, home and correspondence. And as I say, claims to stay in the UK are always made around those two. Article 3, which is about inhuman punishment, and Article 8, which is about family life. Now, Article 3 is the one that we're concerned about today because it has for many years been interpreted in a very broad way by the courts. It's been impliedly interpreted, which is to say, it doesn't say so in as many words, but it's been stretched to mean other things. And although it says no one shall be subjected to torture or to inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment, that's been stretched to mean that you cannot send an asylum seeker back to their country if there is the mildest suspicion that they might be subjected to that sort of degrading treatment or punishment or, at worst, torture. So if there's the faintest suggestion about that, then you basically have to allow them to stay. And that's the one that the courts were concerned about today as well, because it further means that if you send them to a third-party country, such as Rwanda, which then sends them back to the country that they came from and from which they claimed to be fleeing persecution, then this would also be against Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And so to get over this, what the British government did in 2004 was it created the Asylum and Immigration Treatment of Claimants Act 2004, and in that they listed all the safe countries that you could return people to. And Schedule 3 lists the safe countries, and Schedule 3 states, a state to which this part applies is to be treated as a place to which a person can be removed without their convention rights under Article 3 being contravened, and from which a person will not be sent to another state in contravention of their convention rights. And so there's a big list of places, and like France, Switzerland, countries like that, okay? And guess what? Rwanda is not included. So Rwanda is not considered a safe place in the Asylum and Immigration Act 2004. And so that's a glaring loophole. So they basically said, let's all send people back to Rwanda, but let's forget to add Rwanda to the safe countries list. So you have to wonder, was that deliberate almost? Because that's such a glaring loophole in British law. Anyway, what that meant is that the 5 judges today ruled the policy was unlawful because of the risk that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda could then be returned to their own country and could therefore face the problems listed in Article 3, the persecution of their human rights. So what you've got here, and this is an interesting point, is the court today made a political judgment. They made a political decision about whether they think Rwanda is a safe country politically to send people to. Based upon what? Well, based upon what they know, based upon what they've read, based upon what they've seen, based upon what they've heard. Not based upon the black letter of the law, but just what they think politically. Because the government hasn't clearly listed Rwanda as a safe country in the Asylum and Immigration Act 2004, and so the judges themselves have to decide whether or not Rwanda is safe, and they've decided politically, not legally, politically, that it's not safe, and therefore cannot be a place to send these people. And they should not really be doing that, because they made a political judgment there, not a legal one. But, well, they were free to make that political judgment because the government had not made that political judgment for them and had not written it into law. So, the judges have made the decision that Rwanda's not safe, and it's an entirely political decision which is not for them to make. So what's our position on that? What should be the correct thing to do? Well, our position is that Rwanda seemed a slightly wacky idea in the first place, but if we're going to continue it, then the first thing that needs to be done is that the word Rwanda, and we'll spell it for the government as well if they have trouble, but the word Rwanda needs to be added to the safe list in the Asylum and Immigration Act 2004. And then once that's done, if it goes back to court, then the lawyers will look at it and they'll say, oh, holy moly, Rwanda's a safe country now. Yes, you can send them to that. So that's the very first and simple thing. If that's ever going to get done in time for the next general election, we'll have to wait and see. It could, of course, be done overnight if the government actually wanted to, because the government can do anything overnight if it wants to do it, as we saw with the situation back in 2020 when they brought in emergency laws. So secondly, that's the first thing they need to do. Secondly, we are essentially facing an emergency. There's hundreds of people coming over the channel every day. Nothing is being done about them. So it really is something for emergency legislation. If there were to be a party and a government that had the cajones to actually do something about it, it could be done. It could be sorted very easily. What needs to be done? Well, the first thing that needs to be done is the law needs to be sorted. And then the second thing that needs to be done is once you've sorted the law, you get to physical action and you get to stopping people and you get to removing people. But you cannot engage in the physical without first having the legal right. So how do we set the legal right? Now, Suella Braverman suggested this in her letter to Rishi Sunak yesterday, and we've got page 1 of her letter, which we'll just bring up here because there's something in it that I want to highlight to you. And she wrote a three page letter, and let's bring it up. Here we go. Now, I don't know if you can see that very well, but she lists 4 paragraphs there at the bottom. And in number 2, she says one of her things that she wanted Sunak to do was to include specific, quote, notwithstanding clauses into new legislation to stop the boats. That is, exclude the operation of the European Convention on Human Rights, the Human Rights Act, and other international law that has thus far obstructed progress on this issue. Okay, include specific notwithstanding clauses into new legislation. Okay, so what does that mean? What that means is that a government that is faced with a previous law that is going to make its policy difficult can simply put in a clause to a new law that says, notwithstanding Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And what that does is it disapplies that article in British law. It means it has no more effect on that particular matter. So they could bring in a new law tomorrow, the Rwandan asylum law, and the first paragraph could say that everybody's going to be deported to Rwanda, notwithstanding Article 3 of the ECHR or Article 3 of the Human Rights Act. And that would mean that those articles don't apply in this situation. That's what Suella Braverman means there by notwithstanding clauses. They disapply previous law for a particular policy that needs to be carried out at the moment. And it's perfectly legal, and it's been done before on other matters, and it's just a normal constitutional thing that countries around the world do when they need to disapply a particular law in order to get a particular policy done. Only one problem here, and the problem is you're not allowed under the ECHR to disapply Article 3 or Article 8. And if you do disapply it in your domestic law, then it means that you are basically leaving the ECHR. And so you can't actually make a notwithstanding clause and relate it to either Article 3 about torture or Article 8 about family life without actually saying that you're effectively leaving the ECHR. Okay, so notwithstanding clauses don't work with the ECHR. You literally have to leave the ECHR before you can do that. So that's the first thing that actually does need to be done, is you need to leave the ECHR. That's the first legal thing that needs to be done. Now, what that will leave you with, of course, is the British domestic law, the Human Rights Act 1998, and that act you can disapply as much as you want. So once you've got rid of the ECHR, you'll be faced with the Human Rights Act, and you can, if you wish, disapply elements of that in any future law. That's perfectly acceptable. So those are the first 2 things that need to be done, and they do need to be done. if you're serious about stopping immigration, and if you're serious about creating a law which will allow you to do what needs to be done, you firstly need to leave the ECHR, and then you need to, where necessary, apply notwithstanding clauses to the Human Rights Act. Now, once you've done that, you will be legally able to go ahead and do what you need to do physically. And that's where it's going to be a big fight, because the Home Office does not want to stop immigration. And I would suggest that, in fact, the Home Office Department for Immigration and Asylum needs to be scrapped. And the only way you will get a culture that wants to address the problem will be to basically contract it out to an arm's length private organisation that is doing it for financial incentive. That's the only way, because the present British state at Whitehall is not going to stop immigration or asylum. So that's the first thing that needs to be done. And then once you've done that, you can build up the border force, you can stop people in the channel, you can drag boats back, and you can physically return them to France, and you can do all those sorts of things. But until the culture is addressed at Whitehall, then nothing is going to change physically. So the legal things are leave the ECHR and then disapply elements of the Human Rights Act. And you can, once you've done that, once you've cleared the legal path, then you can get with the physical actions that are necessary. But make no mistake, what I am talking about here is a revolution, an absolute revolution in thought, because there's no way the establishment at this time will do any of these things. That to do these things is to totally overturn and sweep away the orthodoxy which has been in place in the West, and especially in the UK, since the end of World War II. Okay, the end of World War II brought in a whole new post-war settlement, and things like the ECHR and all of these things come from that. And to overturn any of that, to leave the ECHR, that's a massive revolution. And it's only going to be revolutionary people and parties that will carry that forward. Because it is the people who want to keep the post-war settlement in place will scream. They will scream if you try to do that. But I think we are entering into a period now where these things are becoming possible, because more and more people are asking, how on earth did we get to the place that we are in? How on earth did we do that? And it's because of all these post-war settlements and all the ideas that came out of the post-war that are in place, and which now no longer function. Now no longer function because the world has moved on technically, and those things now need just to be swept away and new systems to come in. And I can see that happening. So that's a positive message, that at the moment it looks pretty bleak, but we do know what needs to be done. But what needs to be done is a revolution. Now I did bring up some of these ideas in a booklet that I wrote many years ago, called How Britain Lost Control of Its Borders, and that's available at our shop. We'll just put up the link there. And I really need to update this, because this was written prior to us leaving the European Union. This was written back in 2009. So let's put the shop banner up there. There we go. Good. Folks, it's 7:30 exactly. I wonder if I could ask my guest, please, if to give me 5 minutes. We'll give you 5 minutes longer at the top of the hour, but what I want to do is just to do our On This Day in British History. My guest says that's okay. Good, thank you very much. It's Liz Phillips from The Great Resist coming up in 5 minutes. Now, on this day in British History Matters. Well, on this day, and folks, I'll ask you a question immediately afterwards for this badge, and all you need to do is to send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Let's get the address up there. Good. Well, on this day, a famous actor, I'm going to say Le Mesurier. That's probably not how it's pronounced. John Le Mesurier, perhaps. He, in his own words, conked out. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's take a picture of him up there. He was the actor who became a household name after starring in Dad's Army. He played Sergeant Wilson, of course, and also he was Uncle Arthur to Private Pike. And he played the slightly fey, slightly camp chap to the assertive Captain Mainwaring, who would always become frustrated at Wilson's inability to command the men, and that was summed up in Wilson's catchphrase, would you mind awfully? Whenever he wanted to get the men into line, he would ask them, would you mind awfully? And if he wanted to question Captain Mainwaring, he would always say, do you think that's wise, sir? And in fact, there was a stamp released as well with that very catchphrase on it. And he was born John Elton Le Mesurier Halleley in Bedford in 1912, and his mother was from Alderney in the Channel Islands, and it was her maiden name, Le Mesurier, which he took as a middle name and also as his surname. And here we go, there's the picture. Do you think that's wise, sir? And he described himself as a jobbing actor all his life. And he later wrote of his dad's army character. He said, I thought, why not just be myself and behave rather as I had done in the army? I spoke softly, issued commands as if they were invitations not likely to be accepted, and generally assumed a benign air of helplessness. And he penned his death notice before he died, which appeared in the Times on the 16th of November, when he said, John Le Mesurier wishes it to be known that he conked out on November the 15th, and he sadly misses family and friends. And there's a little anecdote which I read about him in this book here, Dad's Army, the story of a very British comedy. And it was the actor Ian Lavender talking about John Le Mesurier. And he was just saying that women would do anything for him. Ian Lavender says, John could get those women to do anything for him. I mean, I actually saw him persuade is the wrong word. I saw him charm a makeup girl into taking the watch off his wrist, winding it up, and then putting it back on again. Oh, he'd say, it's far too much trouble. Could you possibly do it for me, my dear? And she'd do it as if it was the most natural thing in the world for her to do. So that was John Le Mesurier, an actor extraordinaire and household name, died on this day in 1983. And the question for you folks, please send in your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. The answer is, the question rather, is John Le Mesurier. What was the name of his character in Dad's Army? What was the name of his character in Dad's Army? Send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk and you can get this little pin badge, Remembrance Day pin badge. Fantastic. Folks, please welcome to the show from the Great Resist movement. Please welcome Liz Phillips. Now, folks, you won't see the interview on TikTok. Please go to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. And folks, please welcome Liz. How'd you do, Liz?
How are you, Alistair? Good to see you. Can I just say a little anecdote? Because Dad's army, of course, there you can see by my white hair, I wasn't quite born in the war, but just after. But I lived in mid Wales for many years. And they tell you the story. Of course, there were resistance groups, part of the National Home Guard, if you like, all over the country. And in Wales, of course, where we lived, the bouncing bomb was first done up at the Ellen Valley, just above Rwanda. And there's a lovely story that as you come down from the Ellen Valley into Rwanda, you come down not a very steep slope, you come down the slope into Rwanda, and they understood that the Germans were coming. So what they did, they put up a barricade of corrugated iron, straw bales and what have you. And somebody's lorry, and I can't remember whose it was because the story is so funny, came down the hill, its brakes went, and it went straight through the barricade. But that was to stop the huge German army. And, you just have to grin. The stories of the actual Home Guard stories are so funny, but it's absolutely true. This lorry went right through the lot. Huge German hordes.
That's right. It reminds me of the scene, actually, I think in the Dad's Army film, when they all lined up. They'd blocked off the road and they were all behind the bales of hay. And then suddenly they realised that the Germans were coming the other way. So they had to clamber over to the other side of the barrier and face the other way.
It's just absolutely wonderful. And there's one round here from here in Kent, whereby they had a group here, obviously, marshalling, and they had to pass the gun around. I think they had either 12 bore or 410, but they had no ammunition. So to practice, they just used to pass the gun from hand to hand, yes. But no ammunition to fire. I mean, the stories are absolutely wonderful.
Oh, my maternal grandfather was a miner, and he was also in the Home Guard in Turbolton, and they had one shotgun, and they would pass it around, and it would be your week to look after the shotgun, and so they had a gun in the house.
And the final one I'll tell you was a great friend of ours was a major, and I think he was invalided out of the army, but he was posted to the Home Guard on the cliffs on the Isle of Wight, and they thought that this was going to be the landing, etc. And there was a movement on the cliff, so he used his gun and shot what he thought was a German coming up. It was a rabbit.
Well, I'm glad it was just a rabbit.
You can't write the stories. I mean, you can see where Dad's Army got it wrong. I absolutely adore Dad's Army. I have the box set, I have to tell you.
Oh, good.
So sorry.
Good. Well, the Queen Mother was also a big fan, apparently. I know that.
Well, I can believe it.
I was in the Castle of May a couple of years ago, and they told the guest told us that the guide told us that. Anyway, we're sort of the Dad's Army of these days. We are trying to save our country from a very serious enemy that many people have called the Great Reset, or the armies of the Great Reset, and you are in the Home Guard calling yourself the Great Resist.
Yes, now, I'm not sure whether I'm Mrs. Pike or I have to smile because the analogy is absolutely wonderful. It's a bit like the Vicar of Dibley's parish council, really, isn't it? I'm so sorry, Alistair, but I have to have a grin, as we all do, and that's exactly how we resist, don't we?
Yes. Well, it's important to have you on tonight because you were going to have a conference in Liverpool on Saturday, just gone, Saturday the 11th, and well, do you want to just tell us how many people were going to be at your conference and what they were going to talk about, and then what happened? Because it's a very serious matter.
With pleasure, I'll tell you. We the maximum amount of the hotel was 350. We couldn't go above that for health and safety reasons, and we were actually sold out, Alistair. Now, you were very good, and you were part of our first Great Resist conference, which we started off in June in Newport, and you were part of that. And then we moved to Peterborough for the same hotel chain, the Holiday Inn chain, in Peterborough in September, and had a wonderful do there with just under 400 people, slightly bigger venue. And then I wanted to move to Manchester and couldn't get a venue in the Manchester area. I made nearly 100 phone calls in all around the Manchester area, Greater Manchester, which I know like the back of my hand. My husband comes from that half of the world, as did my mother. So I'm very familiar with it, but I couldn't get anywhere. One hotel wanted 7,500 for 6 hours. And then on top of that, you had to pay for the projector that was already in the wall. So I had a giggle, as you do, and thought this is just not on. When you charge a £5 a head per person, because I want the ordinary British, if you like, the ordinary British people to come. I don't want highfalutin, Eton, Oxford educated people. I want the real people who voted for Brexit. These are the people that you want to come along who've woken up and are the real people of the country. So we only charged a fiver a head, so £7,500 was out of the question. Anyway, we ended up at the Holiday Inn in Liverpool, and I worked with a splendid girl there called Barbara, and right up, this was sort of like 6 weeks before, and paid the deposit. Then at the appropriate day, I paid the full amount, paid the balance, as you know, and carried on. And right up until that morning, last Wednesday morning, before Saturday, I was in correspondence with Barbara. All was absolutely fine. Late on Wednesday night, we had an email saying this. Due to a communication we have received, we are no longer able to hold your conference on Saturday to a communication. Now, I think you've got it there, Alistair. You no need to go through it, but it's from a group called Liverpool Against Hate, which maybe, you know. And
well, when you hear a name like that, you know it's Liverpool for that. It's hateful people saying such a thing. Yes, that's it.
That's
there.
It. Dear Holiday Inn.
Won't go through the whole thing, but I've gone through it, and I can tell you that the only things that they seem to be upset about is you let me see it here. They don't like the fact that you're highlighting the Great Reset, because they think that the Great Reset doesn't actually exist, and that you're questioning the climate agenda, and you're also questioning elements of the 2020 situation that happened. That I always am careful not to mention the words, or the algorithms will shut us off. So you're questioning those things quite rightly, but they seem to think that that's wrong, that you're questioning those things, and then they claim that your website endorses a particular group whose only crime seems to be that they oppose quote unquote cultural Marxism. And they go on to say that this opposing cultural Marxism is some sort of conspiracy theory, which apparently means that it's not true. And then another group there, Students Against Tyranny. They can't actually find anything to complain about Students Against Tyranny, so they went on to one of Student Against Tyranny's social media sites and discovered one or two people there posting one or two fruity pictures that could be that's not actually Students Against Tyranny. It's just simply material that's on Student Against Tyranny's social media sites. But that's enough to condemn them as well. And they end up by saying that we respect that both the patrons and employees of the Holiday Inn chain represent many cultures, religions, races, sexualities and gender identities, and hope that you understand how hosting an event that is happy to endorse those whose views would see such diversity as a weakness. Let's say that again. To endorse those whose views would see such diversity as a weakness would damage the reputation of your hotel group. Well, that's such a stretch, and it's just so ridiculous that it does tell you that these people just, well, what do you make of it?
I had to smile because all the people that they say that we're against or could cause a problem would all be in our audience, which was absolutely, every race, colour, nationality, religion, you name it, part of the Great Resist is all these people. And of course, we're not against anything. And hate is the least of all our views that you can wish to have. And to say that Hearts of Oak and Students Against Tyranny are somehow hate organisations, well, anybody with a grain of common sense, Alistair, says, why would any of us, go along with any of this? But let me just tell you about one or two of the people that we had. We were talking about health and, in various guises, and we had four very eminent people from the medical world speaking, including Dr. Robert Malone. And most people know of him from America. So, it's not any small thing. Also, we talk a lot about 5G electromagnetic frequencies as well, and the fourth industrial revolution. What people don't seem to realize is that people like Elon Musk wish to put a chip into your brain so that you can connect immediately to your computer. Now, that to me is absolutely, well, it's obscene to say the least. And then on top of that, we have people like Neil Petrie and Richard Borner. Now, Neil Petrie is an advocate for direct democracy from Switzerland. And Richard Borner, in conjunction with Neil, has developed a program called Block Vote, whereby if you have a referendum, everybody can do it on a voting system which is totally secure. So, I cannot see where the Liverpool Against Hate can possibly have a gripe against us. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yes.
And then we have. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I think the reason that they do is because these are people who, if they sniff any kind of anti-globalist agenda, which the sort of things you're talking about there are, could be thrown into the field of anti-globalist, pro-UK, pro-sovereignty, pro-national sovereignty. If you're at all anti-globalist, if you're at all against any of the orthodoxies of the modern world, then they see you as an enemy. And this word hate is used just to slander people. And I've been upset at the so-called right wing latching onto that in the last couple of weeks as well. And Suella Braverman as well, calling things hate, is just feeding totally into that leftist, for want of a better expression, pro-globalist agenda, where you just throw that mark on somebody as a hateful person, as a hater, preaching hate or whatever, and then you can do anything to them, including cancelling them as they've done to you. And what these people want to do is just make it impossible for you to politically organise in any way. They want to make it impossible for the anti-globalist movement and people to organise anywhere at any time. But who are these people? These people are probably just two or three disaffected youths with access to an email. That's really all that group is. They're not a big, massive movement representing any kind of significant demographic in society. So it's really shameful that they should be able to basically put you out, because it's not just putting you out. It's you. Did you say there was over 300 people were going?
350.
Well, some of them will have bought a night in the Holiday Inn. I would presume they'd be staying in Liverpool overnight. They've already spent money.
One group I think of 6 or 8 had actually gone to a bed and breakfast, and the poor people in the bed and breakfast place had actually got all the food in because they were going to eat in as well, as you can imagine. So it's a huge knock-on effect, and many people in Liverpool have kicked up over this, as you can imagine, Alistair, because it's not the people of Liverpool, and I don't believe this is Liverpool Against Hate. I think it's Hope Not Hate, who are government funded through spurious means. So, yes. But what they don't realise is the idiots, and I have to say they are complete idiots. What they don't realise is it's given us far more publicity from what they've done, far more support. And, people are absolutely infuriated that on Armistice Day, when we chose this day in particular because we're carrying on the fight against the globalists, which is a fight for free speech and total freedom, as we who were born in the late 40s, early 50s, have all enjoyed, Alistair. We want the same for our children. They don't seem to realise, that this is what we were all about. We had two wonderful people talking about agriculture, one from this country and one from New Zealand, because, of course, agriculture is being shut down all over. And I've just watched a programme with Malcolm Roberts from Australia saying that farms are being seized in Australia. And this is to stop actual farming, actual growing of food. And then on top of that, we had the wonderful Kathy Gingell from the Conservative Woman, who spoke on alternative media and sticking to your guns. So when you speak the truth, Alistair, you've got to continue to speak the truth. And no matter what's thrown at you, you just keep going, because
Yes.
That's exactly, and she opened the conference with that. And so we had a wonderful cross-section. And then we had Michael Tellinger from South Africa, who has started in South Africa One Small Town, which is an absolute wonderful concept, which is just being rolled out over here, together with Mark Taylor from Thetford in Norfolk, who has actually gone on to setting up a sovereign council, because people are so fed up with their councils, town councils, parish councils, metropolitan borough councils, etc., not doing what the constituencies want. So there's Mark Taylor from Thetford. They've set up a sovereign council, which matches in with a group that we work with called the Great Rising, who are want to go from a corporate Britain to a sovereign Britain to get all this back. We've got to take the initiative out of the hands of the politicians in Whitehall, and also with you up in Edinburgh and down in Cardiff in South Wales. And of course, Northern Ireland aren't sitting at the moment. But, we've got to bring this back to the people and got to get rid of the politicians as they are. This is where the problem is. Across the world, if you think of Israel and Palestine, the Israelis and the Palestinians will live side by side quite happily. It's the political elite that's causing the trouble everywhere. We've got to get rid of them, Alistair.
Oh, yeah, I second that emotion. Yeah, did you say Thetford there?
Yes, Thetford is in Norfolk.
Yes,
Thetford in East Anglia. Yeah,
that's where they filmed Dad's Army, in the town of Thetford.
Yes, up yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Absolutely, I agree. So the question is, what can be done about this? Now, I was minded when I heard of you of a situation that occurred at the start of this year when an SNP MP that I don't have any particular love for or anything like that, but she wanted to do an event at a venue in Edinburgh, and they prevented her doing it on the basis that the staff didn't like her message, because she was Joanna Cherry. She was anti the trans movement, basically, and she wanted to talk about that. And the venue did what they did to you, was they cancelled the event. But because she's actually a King's Counsel, and because she's well in with the crowd who are lawyers and people like that, she got a separate King's Counsellor to give advice on the matter, and she basically obtained advice of a senior counsel, KC as they call it, who argued that cancelling her like that was unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act. Now, I'll just throw up the law here that I've got. Summary of the law. Here we go. There we go. Section 4 of the Equality Act 2010 includes protection for religion or belief. And belief means, quote, any religious or philosophical belief, and a reference to belief includes a reference to a lack of belief, whatever a lack of belief is. But basically, if you have a philosophical belief on something, that's meant to be protected under the Equality Act. And so she sent this advice. She got a lawyer to contact their lawyers, and lo and behold, the venue backed down, and the venue apologized, and they sent a message here. Can't see that because the Great Resist thing is in the way. Let me just get rid of that banner. There we go. Apology. Our clients unreservedly apologize to your client for their previous decision. They hope that your client will accept their unreserved apology. Our clients intend to publicly acknowledge that their previous decision unlawfully discriminated against your client and publicly apologize to your client for that decision. So they basically, none of that went to court or anything like that. That was just settled out of court. But it's still an example. It's still a precedent that can be used to show that it could well be this sort of activity of just cancelling people could be actually unlawful in law. And the Equality Act is pro-UK. It's throughout the United Kingdom, so it applies as much in Liverpool as it does there in Edinburgh. So that's one angle. But of course that requires a lawyer that wants to work with you. It requires money to pay a lawyer and all that sort of stuff. But I suppose there's also the breach of contract. Have you thought about that as an angle?
I have indeed, Alistair. And, unfortunately, when you look at all these things, it might be all right for Joanna Cherry in Scotland, who is an MSP, I think, member of the Scottish Parliament.
MP, no, she's a member of Parliament.
MP, sorry, I beg your pardon. And also, she's well in with lawyers, etc., who will take this on. I always find that if you go down the legal route like this, it's the lawyers that make a lot of money, and you end up either paying a lot of money and not getting anything back, etc. But there is something called common law. Now, common law states one thing, or states two things really. You cause no harm, loss, or injury, and you are honourable in your contracts. So I'm looking at dealing with this under common law. And I've got people that are well versed in common law that are more than happy to look at how we take this through. Instead of going down the route which costs an arm and a leg through solicitors and barristers, and when you look at it at the end of the day, they're all brother and Bob anyway. I'm looking at taking this through common law. Mm-hmm. So, and that is the basis of British law. Cause no harm, loss, or injury, and be honourable in your contracts. I was, they weren't.
Yes, well, that's a very that's a good angle as well to do. I'm thinking it might be an idea that in future to have a document prepared already to say when they come back to you, when they come to you to say. You can't be there when they cancel you. That might just be one young manager who gets the frighteners suddenly. Oh my, what's this? What are they talking about? What's this kind of politics? What's going to happen? Is there going to be a mass demonstration outside the Holiday Inn? Panics, thinks I'll take the easy route. I'll just cancel the event. But if somebody came straight back and said, well, actually. Breach of contract 1, 2, 3, 4, actually unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act, chapter and verse. Then he's going to go, he's going to look at this, and then he's going to look at your letter, and you know what? Just let them have it. So it might just be in future. It might just be something like that. I can help you with this as well. We can prepare it, or others helps. You've got other people helping you, I know, but just something for the manager to look at as an alternative and say, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I don't want to get the Holiday Inn into trouble. I don't want to get into all sort of breach of contract problems. And who knows, maybe because it's really bad when something like that happens. I mean, we don't want that to happen again.
We certainly don't. We took it on the nose on the day. We didn't panic at all. We managed to get it out virtually, which we hadn't done before, and people stuck with us, God bless them, apart from a couple of technical problems where we had all our speakers, if you like, that came on Alistair, and did it virtually at the time that they would have done it in Liverpool. And we've also obviously put the speeches up on the website like we've done before, like you would do too.
Good. Well,
But
let's get your website address up there.
it's
thegreatresist.net.
that's correct.
Yes, all one word, thegreatresist.net. Good. Well, I'm glad that you were able to do quite a lot of that virtually then as well. But it always helps if you've got the physicality to actually meet people, to say hello to people, to bond in that way. And that's so crucial about what you're doing, which is the actual physical stuff. You're doing a balance. You're doing physical stuff and video stuff, which is a good balance.
Thank you, Alistair, very much. And yes, the next event is on the 3rd of February next year, and I will do my very best. You can never say it will never happen again, because I wouldn't. But of course, we used the Holiday Inn in Peterborough. We went there and had a wonderful time in September. We had just under 400 people there, and it was absolutely fantastic and no problem at all. And again, the staff in the Holiday Inn at Peterborough, at Liverpool, Barbara, who I dealt with, absolutely first class. It
Good.
was the management that the problem.
Yes,
and so
yes.
we will be sorting out. I will keep you updated.
Yes, that's right. So many of the management as well, it's not that they're ideological themselves, it's just that they take the easiest route, the path of least resistance, or what they imagine is the path of least resistance. But anyway, well done for everything that you do. We'll definitely get you back on again if there's any advances in this sort of situation, any news about how it might resolve itself in time, then we'll certainly be coming to you to find out, and we'll stay in touch about all of it. So just remains for me to say thank you very much for coming on tonight, and more power to your elbow, Liz.
It's an absolute pleasure. And believe it or not, there was a huge article written in the Conservative Woman, with nothing to do with the Conservative Party before anybody. Beautiful article from somebody from New South Wales in Australia, Paul Collett. And I'm going to interview him next week. And so, we're worldwide, and it's done the wonders.
Good. Well, I know the article that you've got. We'll put that out on our social media platforms and on this thread as well, and also on the video that we put up of this interview on YouTube. So we'll do our best to push that around as well. Good.
Bless you.
Okay, then.
Thank you very much, and to all your listeners, the Scots all around the world. God bless you all.
God bless you too. Good night. Fantastic. Liz Phillips with a very important political message there, and that's a very important thing that happened as well, getting pushed out like that for nothing at the end of the day. So very pleased to be able to highlight that, and it just shows you behind the scenes not all is well in the UK as far as freedom of speech is concerned, but we stand by it for everybody, even for people that we disagree with. And that's our attitude. Now, folks, we'll be doing our Yule Britannia Christmas Crowdfunder, our 28-day appeal, which we do once a year. That will be beginning on Wednesday, the 29th of November. And that will be running until the 27th of December. We will also, by the beginning of December, we'll have our new book ready, which will be the first in a series. The series is going to be called A Big Book for the Union. And the first volume will be called One Big Country. It's going to be probably around about 125 pages. It's essentially written. It'll be written by Friday evening, and it'll be 30,000 words. So it will be bigger than a booklet, but it won't be a massive tome. It will be just right, as it were, to finish in a few hours. So it's really good, and we have the idea of knocking a book out once a year, for the next few years to form a really nice series of books about our fantastic United Kingdom. Now, we have a winner for this. We asked the question, Jean Le Mesurier, he passed away on this day in 1983, and what was the name of his dad's army character? And that was the question. Yes, and the answer was, of course, Sergeant Wilson. And the winner is Stuart MacDonald. Fantastic, Stuart. We will get that in the post to you tomorrow. So thank you for being involved. And Stuart actually says thank you to Liz for her chat, as does Christopher. And Scotland Scorpion says that was a really good interview. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. And Scotland Scorpion also says congrats, Stuart. Well done, Stuart, says Christopher. And Stuart says thanks. Good. Okay, folks. Thank you very much. I think that was a good show tonight. I really enjoyed that. Got a lot of good information out there. A lot of good information out there. And deserves a very wide audience. This program deserves a huge audience. It really does. And that day will come. That day will come. This is the 80th show of Good Evening Britain. And it's going to be many more in time. So it just remains for me to say, folks, we'll be back next Wednesday, same time, same place, 7 to 8. And so it's thank you for everybody's comments. Thank you for everybody on TikTok. Just remains for me to say God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.